We'll get started in just a few minutes, but for now, if you're joining from a school or if you're joining in a group, we'd really appreciate it if you could maybe send through in the chat box just where you're joining from and how many of you are watching from the same computer, just so we can get an idea of who all's out there. I see we've had some comments coming through in the chat that say they're very excited for the Penguin webinar, so we're really, really happy to have you with us here today. We're just going to hang on until 15:15 and then we'll get started and hear about penguins from Taryn at SANCCOB. All right, it's 15:15. We're going to get started for today's session. Welcome again. For those of you who are new with us, your webcams and your microphones have been muted as part of the standard Zoom webinar feature, but we really want to hear from you today. So we encourage you to send through your questions or your comments in the chat box or in the Q&A box, and we'll read those out after the presentation. You're welcome to send them through as we go, though, just that you don't forget anything. And after the presentation, you're welcome to raise any topics about penguins for discussion with Taryn here today. Then our webinars are recorded and these will be available on our YouTube page after the session. And then if you have any comments or questions or suggestions after today's webinar, you're welcome to email us at webinars@sccafrica.org.za. And if they're not for us, then we can certainly pass those along to Taryn and we can answer those. She can answer those after the session. For now, we're going to move on to today's session and we're going to hear all about penguins. All right.
Hello, boys and girls. My name is Taryn and I am speaking to you from SANCCOB, which is the South African National Foundation for the Conservation of Coastal Birds. So let's first look at what a seabird or coastal bird actually is. So of all the different types of bird species, only 3% are seabirds, and that's not a lot of birds. Many species of coastal birds feed at surface waters of the ocean. Some, like the shorebirds, wade in the water to find their food. It's kind of like what we do when we splash around in the waves at the ocean. And then a third group of species, the true seabirds, only feed at sea, either in the surface waters, swimming underwater, or diving deep down to catch their fish. There are many different types of seabirds that we sometimes see along our coasts. These include oceanic birds such as the petrels and the albatross, as well as coastal birds such as Cape gannets, the terns, the common tern, the swift tern, oyster catchers, cormorants, and a few gulls, to name just a few. And then, of course, we have the African penguin. Did you know that African penguins are actually birds? There are very special types of seabirds that are flightless, which means that they cannot fly, but they do have modified wings, which act as flippers for swimming great distances underwater. So let's see how much you actually know about penguins. Can penguins fly? What do you think?
There's a poll that's popped up now. If you can vote whether you think penguins can fly or not. I think, Taryn, I think you gave us a bit of a hint in the previous slide. So We'll see if people were listening.
Yes,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sure they were. Okay. No, penguins cannot fly. As I mentioned in the previous slide, penguins are known as flightless birds. However, when they go underwater, it definitely looks like they can fly. So if you have a look at this video, this is some of our birds in our home pen. As they flap their wings or flippers, it looks exactly like they fly, and they are going super, super fast. And they can actually reach speeds of up to 24 kilometers per hour when they are swimming underwater. And that's really, really fast for such a small little body. There we can see some of our home pens birds showing us how it's done. Okay, what do penguins eat?
I'm guessing not vegetables, but there's another poll that people, that all our attendees can fill in.
Correct there that they do not eat vegetables. Most penguins eat small pelagic fish, such as sardines and anchovies. And this is in direct competition with us because we also fish for these types of fish for eating.
What does pelagic mean, Taryn?
A pelagic fish is a fish that's found not quite at the top of the ocean layer, but a little bit further deeper down, where the penguins actually need to dive down to catch them. Why are penguins black and white?
It's because they're going to a fancy party.
Not quite. The black and white coloration helps the penguins to blend into their environment. They also have unique little spot patterns on their tummies that is different for every single penguin. And this is just like our fingerprints. What is the African penguin also known as? The African penguin is also known as the jackass penguin because their call sounds like a braying donkey. And this is what it sounds like. Okay, so in Algoa Bay, which is part of the south coast in South Africa, which is the south area of Africa, I'm trying to find my notes. We find African penguins on two breeding islands, St. Croix Island and Bird Island. The African penguin we find all the way from central Namibia down towards Bird Island. We also have a few colonies in Cape Town, and in that area, they are actually found on beaches sometimes, and people are able to see the African penguin at the beach.
So you're saying people can go swim with the penguins at the beaches?
Yes, exactly. Okay. African penguins are very special, and they are often fun to watch in their natural environment. And people come from far and wide all over the world to see them, which brings income into our country. Many people are able to visit penguins at the beaches in Cape Town, as we mentioned, but in Algoa Bay, people don't often get to see them in the wild because they live on islands. So people come to see them at SANCCOB, which is found in Cape Recife Nature Reserve in Gqeberha. I'll tell you a little bit more about SANCCOB and what we do a bit later. And this is great because when visitors come, they pay to visit the penguins and see and learn a lot more about them, which helps fund their conservation, as well as helps us to keep them or to heal them and put them back out into the wild. And Douglas over here loves it when people come and visit. He always runs up enthusiastically to greet. Yeah. So in the environment, penguins also have a very important role to play. And this is why the conservation of the African penguin is so important. The African penguin is what we call an indicator species, which tells us about the ecosystem and how healthy that ecosystem is that the African penguin lives in. So if there's enough food for the African penguin to eat, there'll be enough that will increase the number of the African penguin populations, and then there'll be enough food for the predators to eat, which means that everything is in balance and everyone has something to eat in the environment. Sadly, though, the number of African penguins have dropped drastically over the last number of years, and it has been listed as an endangered species. And this means that there are very few of them left living in the wild. Their population has decreased or gone down to less than 2% of the numbers that they were in the early 1900s, with only 13,000 breeding pairs left in the wild from the over 2 million that there once were. And some of the reasons for this is depleted fish stocks, which means that the number of fish in the wild is actually dropping, as well as overfishing. And that has been a very, very big challenge for the African penguin. Because if there isn't enough food for them, there isn't enough food for them to feed their chicks. And the parents end up abandoning or leaving their babies to fend for themselves, which can result in death if they are not rescued by SANCCOB rangers. There are also many emaciated or underweight birds that are admitted to our center monthly. And I'll explain what we do to help get them fat again. Okay. Climate change has also had drastic effects on the populations of the African penguin. So with climate change, all the storms that we have are getting bigger. The sun is getting hotter, so we have a lot more hot days, both of which often result in the parents leaving their chicks because they are too hot and they can't sit on land for too long, and their nests might actually end up flooding. The temperature is also then too cold for the chicks to handle, and that can result in them dying as well. With global warming and the melting of the ice, the sea level is also rising, which will affect the beach and other low-lying colonies, as there will be less space for them to make their nests. On top of all of that, pollution is also something that affects African penguin, as it does with a lot of other marine species. Oil spills specifically have a drastic effect on seabirds who rely on the natural waterproof oils on their feathers. When they are oiled, they cannot swim because they are not waterproof. And the oil also sticks to their feathers and causes clumps. When oil spills happen, it can have a terrible effect on wild populations. Entanglements in fishing gear, in other words, the birds getting stuck in fishing gut as well as hooks and other plastics, as well as the ingestion or the birds actually eating plastic, often results in unfortunate and unnecessary death of these birds as well. And then the only natural challenge that African penguins should in fact face is predation. But because of their numbers being so low, even predation becomes a major challenge for them in actually helping them, enabling them to increase their population numbers. Luckily for the African penguin, we do have SANCCOB, which is there to rescue, rehabilitate, and release African penguins or other seabirds that we might have in our care, as well as do some research on how we can help them and educate the public on how to do a little bit better themselves. So at SANCCOB, we rescue seabirds. So for example, some of the abandoned chicks or some of the chicks that may have been abandoned by their parents, we bring them into our care and we look after them and make them nice and fat and send them back out into the wild once they are old enough to look after themselves. Some of the birds that may get entangled in fishing gut and fishing hooks, we also help them and fix them up, which means rehabilitate. So when we help a bird and we make them better than what they were, that means that we have rehabilitated that particular bird so that it can go back out into the wild. And then we also have help some birds that may have been stuck in an oil spill. We help clean them up and get them waterproof again so that they can swim and go back out into the wild. And then any injured birds that may have been injured by predators, we also rescue them and bring them into the center to fix them up. So SANCCOB also helps to rehabilitate birds, which means that we fix them, or we heal them, and we put them back into the wild. And a lovely story of rehabilitation is the story of African penguin number 41. AP41 came in with a completely dislocated leg. This is seen in the very first picture on the left-hand side. And this was pinned and splintered by a veterinarian. And he was in rehabilitation with us until while his bones were healing. At the moment, he is completely healed and can be seen in the picture on the right-hand side. And on the 30th of September, that was when he left rehab, and we put him into the home pen with some of the other birds so that he could molt, which means lose all of his feathers and get all completely new feathers. And once he is fully molted and fully waterproof, we will send him back out into the wild after having been with us for quite a number of months. What we also do is we rehabilitate the chicks. So some of the chicks that you've seen in the previous image, we hand feed them and get them to be nice and big and strong. Once they are about 3 months old, we start swimming them to make sure that they are nice and waterproof and that their swimming muscles are strong, because that is when we are going to release them back into the wild. And this is exactly what we aim for through rehabilitation, is releasing the birds back into the wild. So here we can see a number of African penguin adults, as well as a few blues, which are the 3-month-old penguins, being released off of Bird Island after spending some time in rehabilitation at the center. And then at SANCCOB, we also do some research so that we know what's happening in the wild and if the penguins are actually, how they're doing in terms of after we've released them, as also if there's enough food for them to eat. We look at any diseases which they might have, as well as doing some studies on nest boxes. And then, of course, we educate. And this is where webinars and things like this actually come in, so we can inform people more about the environment and how species such as the African penguin is so important, and not just important for us to look at, but also to tell a story about what's happening in the natural environment. So those are some of the things that we do to help the African penguin. And some things that you could do to help the African penguin is help to raise awareness about the terrible challenges that are faced by them and other seabirds and animals in the marine environment. You can do your best to reduce the amount of rubbish that you produce and dispose of your rubbish properly. Remember the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. And then to support us at SANCCOB, you can come and visit with your family or friends, and then also raise funds to maybe adopt an African penguin to sponsor its rehabilitation. And if you find a penguin or any other stranded seabird on the beach, you can give us a call, and we will come out and rescue the seabird, and it will go through the process of rehabilitation and hopefully be released again. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much to Taryn for that wonderful presentation. I see we've had quite a few comments coming through already in the chat, so we're going to get to those in just a minute. And then we also just wanted to let you all know that there are some online activities that have been made available this week. So after the webinar, you're welcome to head over to africanwasteacademy.org, and you'll find a course there called Marine Week 2021. And when it asks you for a code, you'll just need to enter MW21. You may need to just get some help from a parent or a teacher for the registration there, but there are some fun activities that you can go complete after today's session. For now, I see we've got plenty of questions that have come through so far. So Taryn, where to start? I see there's one here in the chat that says, can locals volunteer at SANCCOB?
That's a very good question. Thank you. Yes, we do have local volunteers. You need to be over the age of 18 in order to volunteer at SANCCOB. And if you would like to volunteer, you can just send me an email, and then I'll respond with some more information about volunteering and the kind of work that you would be doing. I think my email did pop up earlier, Tara.
I think so, but we can also share that if you're happy for us to pass that along, if anyone contacts us or asks for it in the chat. Then there's a question that says, oh, sorry about that, a question that says, have you ever been bitten by a penguin?
I haven't, but that's only because I don't work physically with the birds. The rehabbers that do work with the birds, they do get bitten quite often. It is mostly wild birds that they're working with. So a wild bird is going to want to defend itself when it's feeling a little bit vulnerable. So yes, people get bitten often when working with the birds. That's why we have very strong gloves and sleeves and things that get worn when working with them.
I'm sure there must be quite a few bruises from from the penguins.
And not just biting, they slap too with their flippers.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then how many penguins does SANCCOB rehabilitate each year in Gqeberha?
In Gqeberha, we probably rehabilitate close to 500 African penguins a year, depending on what is happening in the year, if there's been a crisis, oil spill, any sort of diseases, or African penguin chick crisis like we had recently, that pushed our numbers far over 200 so far. But yeah, in total for the organization as a whole, we rescue close to 2,500 seabirds a year on average.
Wow, that's quite a lot. Busy years. And then what are nest boxes?
Nest boxes are artificial little houses that the penguins or little little houses is probably the best way to explain it, that the penguins live in. And on the island, if we need to put nest boxes out, it's because of the fact that there isn't enough guano for the penguins to actually burrow into. Well, guano is their poo, and it creates a perfect sort of climate for the penguins to live in. So it's hot. It keeps the babies warm when it's cold, and it keeps them cool when it's really hot as well. So the nest boxes are there to kind of mimic that sort of, or copy that, fill that role. Yeah.
Okay, and then do penguins have unique calls or sounds that they can recognize each other?
Yes, they do. Like most birds or animals, we don't hear the difference between the birds, but African penguin mom or dad will recognize its chicks' calls, and the male and female will recognize their partner's calls as well.
Okay. And then how old do penguins and other seabirds get?
For the African penguin in the wild, they can live up from 12 to 15 years, but more likely closer to 12. And in captivity, they can live up to about 30 years because there's no risk of predation. They get 2 square meals a day. And I'm not too sure about other seabirds, but probably around the same, depending on the species. So it all depends on what the actual type of seabird is.
Okay. And then what's the most common issue with birds coming into SANCCOB?
Sure. This year, it's been because of storms. The main ones are the ones that I've mentioned in the webinar. So it would be things like entanglements, especially for the juvenile kelp gulls. So lots and lots of entanglements with fishing gut, and sometimes they get caught in fishing hooks as well. A lot of the time, most of the birds that do come in, it's injury related. So it could be from propeller strikes or boat strikes, and maybe a seal bite or a shark bite that they actually managed to escape from. And then also a lot of the chicks come in because of they've been abandoned by their parents. So recently it was because of the big storms, and their nest would have gotten flooded, so they were rescued from the island to stop them from dying of due to the elements. And also because of birds that come in because they emaciated or very, very skinny. They just starved. There's not enough food for them to eat. Yeah.
Okay. And then there's a question here in the chat that says, does SANCCOB release all their penguins, and what percentage of the penguins kind of thrive after they're released back into the wild? And I'd just like to add on to that, how do you distinguish between which birds get released and which ones stay at SANCCOB in captivity for 30 years?
So the ones that are in captivity at the moment at SANCCOB, they've been here for a long time. We don't add to that population, so we haven't been adding any more penguins to that population. Those ones that are here have just been here. And most of the birds, when they do get released, those that can be released, we tag them with or not tag them, but we put a little microchip under their skin, and that gives us an idea of if we pick up another bird, if it's been released before. But because of that, we don't really know what percentage of the birds actually survive. If we don't pick up their tags, we don't really know. And then, so the birds that can't be rehabilitated, so if we can't make them better, we consider the welfare of the bird, and sometimes we have to unfortunately put them to sleep. But rather that than keep them with a really bad injury if they can't be released back into the wild. So it's unfortunate, but we have to consider welfare.
I see, and you don't want to release it, back into the sea with an injured bird, with an injured wing or something, and it's
if it doesn't. Yeah, if it doesn't meet the release criteria, then we unfortunately have to release it. Not release it. We unfortunately have to put it to sleep. Yeah.
Can you mention a few of the things that are part of the release criteria? A few items.
Sure. So we look at the weight of the penguin, depending on if it's a blue or a adult. That will tell us what weight they need to be at. So it's usually over 2.6 to 2.8 kilograms, depending on the age. And we also check the waterproofing of the birds. So we make sure that they're 100% waterproof, so that that their feathers and their skin actually stays dry. We test their blood work, so we make sure that their blood work is clean and they've got all the good healthy blood cells in their blood. And then we also just make sure that they are fully healthy, that their hydration is up, is good, they have enough fluids, and they're eating well, and that they're nice and big and strong enough to actually go out and survive in the wild.
Okay. And then how many eggs can the penguin lay all at once?
In one clutch, which is the little number of eggs that the penguin can lay, the penguins lay 1 to 2 eggs in one sort of clutch. Special cases sometimes have maybe 3, but it's very seldom that happens, but mostly 1 to 2 eggs. Also depending on if it's the first breeding season for that particular penguin. Yeah.
Okay. And then there are a few questions here that somewhat link that say how tall can a penguin get, and how much can they weigh?
Sure. I've actually never thought about how tall they are. They are about 80 centimeters if I have to guess, maybe more. Yeah. They get about like that big from my desk. And then in terms of weight, it depends on the actual bird. They can kind of get up to about 3 kilograms or so.
Okay, and
more.
these would be then specifically the African penguins, emperor penguins.
Yes. Yeah, the emperor penguins. The emperor penguins can be about the size of a person. They're quite big birds.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's another question that says, how big are penguins' beaks?
How big are their beaks? The African penguin's beak is about that big.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can manage to bite with it.
Oh yes. Yes.
Okay, and then what's the worst oil spill SANCCOB has ever dealt with, and how many birds had to be rehabilitated due to that spill?
Oh, goodness. I might have to get back to you on that one. I might have to get back to you on that one. There was one in 2019. There were about 105 birds that were sort of hurt in that one. But yeah, I can definitely find out a bit more about that.
Okay. And then there's another question here that says, do penguins have teeth?
They don't have teeth, but they do have little spikes on the inside of their mouths, and those little spikes help with catching catching or gripping onto the fish. Yeah.
Okay.
I can answer the previous on the question. It was the treasure oil spill that had the largest effect on the African penguin population. And that was, as someone did mention, they said they helped with the treasure oil spill in 2000. So it was 21 years ago. That's how it was in Cape Town. Yeah.
Okay, and then I see we've had some comments coming through here saying that they had the opportunity to visit Simonstown early this year and it was a wonderful experience. And then there are a few other people who say that they visited the SANCCOB Center in Klebege today and they thoroughly enjoyed it. And then we're nearly out of time. So I just want to end with one question. Taryn, you mentioned that people can adopt a penguin. How much does it cost to get a pet penguin that you don't have to take care of?
So for an adoption of an African penguin, for a rehabilitation penguin, it's 600 Rand. And that 600 Rand sponsors that penguin's rehabilitation. So it goes towards any medication that the penguin might need. It goes towards its food, any vet visits that it might have, and as well as just the general care of that African penguin.
Okay.
And you get to name it if it's a rehab penguin.
I'm sure that's an important consideration.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't see any other questions that have come through right now, but if anyone has any at a later stage, you're welcome to send those through. And sorry, there's one more that's just popped up that says, for adopting a penguin, does the company, so SANCCOB, keep the penguin for you?
If it's a rehabilitation penguin, the aim is not to keep it. So we have the penguin with us, and then you'll get updates as the penguin is going along. So the adoption it's a sponsorship of that penguin's stay at SANCCOB more than actual like physical adoption of the bird. Yeah.
Sure. Yes, we want them to stay in the wild where they can thrive and be healthy. Yes. All right. I see that it's 1:45 now. And some people are sending through the names of their adopted penguins. But I think we'll close off the session here for today. Taryn, I'm not sure if you want to share any closing words with us.
I just want to say thank you to everyone who has joined us today and is watching this live, and thank you for all the lovely questions. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and a special thank you to Taryn for putting together this whole presentation and for taking the time to share with us about penguins today. It was really great. Thanks, everyone. On behalf of SST, we just like to say thanks, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. And we hope to see you all tomorrow afternoon for the final webinar in our Marine Week series, which will be talking about fish nurseries. So we hope to see you all then. Goodbye, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon. And don't forget to go check out our activities on africanwasteacademy.org. Until tomorrow, bye-bye.